Crashed?
Jim, just a few moments ago, something believed to be a plane crashed into the south tower of the World Trade Center. I just saw flames inside. You can see the smoke coming out of the tower. We have no idea what it was. It was a tremendous boom just a few moments ago. You can hear around me emergency vehicles heading towards the scene. Now, this could have been an aircraft, or it could have been something internal. It appears to be something coming from the outside due to the nature of the opening on about the 100th floor of the south tower of the World Trade Center. Police vehicles and fire vehicles are zipping by me here. We just have no idea. To the south of the tower, we see some particles, also some gray smoke. Now the smoke coming out of the opening appears to be black smoke. This would indicate things are burning inside. We have no idea of what happened, but we did hear what sounded like an aircraft, and then a tremendous boom. Now, I don't know whether we can confirm that was an aircraft or not. David, what did you hear? What would you say you heard? This is our cameraman, Dave Stolick.
Incredible explosion. Very, very loud.
How about you, hon?
It sounded like a bomb.
Well, it could be. It could be something internal as well. There are pieces of the superstructure of the World Trade Center sticking out, but a lot going in. As I say, this appears to be about the 100th floor of the south tower of the World Trade Center. I hope we can get some further information from the newsroom up there, Jim.
Ollie, I'm just told also that our transmitter, which is on top of the World Trade Center, also took a hit. So we were briefly affected up here. One's memory has to go back to the another terrorist attack. One would hope it is not this time, but if it were a plane that crashed into the side of the building, you would imagine that there would be something on the ground that would be visible. So
that's true, Jim. I cannot see the ground from here. You'll recall back in, I believe it was 1945, when a U.S. Air Force plane crashed into about the 70th or 80th floor of the Empire State Building during a foggy night. The skies here, as you can see, are perfectly clear. So I'm starting to lean to the idea that perhaps this, whatever happened here, came from the inside of the World Trade Center.
Yeah, that incident back there in the 40s in the offices of Catholic Charities up on the 80th floor of the Empire State Building. This, of course, the new tallest building in town. Now, obviously, on the north tower of the World Trade Center, something has either crashed into the World Trade Center. If it were I'm just told that Metro Traffic is reporting that it was indeed a plane crash. If that's the case, where's the plane? I would ask. I don't see it in that live picture there. And one's thoughts obviously go back to a terrorist attack on the World Trade Center that created havoc there back in the early 90s. Ollie, any new developments that you can see from your vantage point?
You can see flames now. There is a fire going on at that site. We don't know. Are you saying that shadow traffic is saying something about a plane?
Shadow traffic is telling us that it was indeed a plane crash. Metro traffic, I'm sorry. Metro traffic is telling us that it was indeed a plane crash. Now, I understand that you are over by City Hall, having been reporting on the political developments. Now, you are a good, 8, 9, 10 blocks away from the scene right now?
At least, Jim. We're at Park Row, and, of course, the World Trade Center is at least 6 or 7 blocks away from us. I do see more flame now.
Okay, you can see, because we cannot see flame. We see lots of black smoke, but we can't see flame. All right, here's Ollie, if you have a monitor there, I don't know whether you do or not, but there is another picture in which we do see flame.
Right.
And we see a gaping hole in the exterior of the north tower of the World Trade Center with smoke. Go ahead.
That's the south side of the north tower of the World Trade Center. If this indeed was an aircraft, this has not been confirmed. It was heading south over Manhattan. And I did hear some kind of a screech or some kind of a wail before a tremendous boom. I first thought it was a plane. Then I looked at at what was going on here and saw that perhaps it was internal rather than external. But we'll have to wait for official confirmation on that.
Now,
emergency vehicles, as you know, Jim, are really pouring onto the scene.
Sure, we can hear them in the background as you're reporting to us. Now, once again, what time was it, if you can recall, Ali, when this took place?
We were right into the commercial break, and it was about a minute and a half before we came on, Jim, so work it out.
All right, Ali. Now, I'm told by the control room that we're obviously trying to talk to people in that neighborhood who have been a little closer to it than you are, Ali. Do we have any people to talk to?
Sure, we've got some people here walking away. Excuse me, sir, did you see what happened?
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I saw something. It's something like bomb, and
Did you see anything hit the building, or did it come from the building?
that's the bomb. I think so. That's the
Something
bomb.
hit the building?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, we got some other people. They're all rushing away from the site.
Don't blame him, especially that fellow with a little girl in his arms.
Did you see what happened, sir? Did you see what happened? What happened?
Well, I was in the past train, and there was a huge explosion sound. Everyone came out. A large section of the building is blown out, around like the 80th floor.
Was it hit by something, or was it something inside?
It was inside. Because it looked out. Everything was coming out. All the windows were coming out. All the papers were
What
coming
is on
out.
the sidewalk?
I didn't see anything.
Was there any people hurt, do you know?
I just ran, and everyone in the past train just ran. I don't know if anyone was hurt, but I assume they were because the windows were all blown out.
All right, thank you.
Ali, you would have to assume a very, very terrible situation if that indeed is the case, because I'm sure there were people up there in that. There were people up there in that World Trade Center. Now, we have lost, again, our transmitter is on top of the World Trade Center, so we apparently have consequently lost contact with Dick Oliver, but we are on the phone with an eyewitness. Rosa, can you hear me? Is Rosa there?
Hello?
Rosa?
Yes.
This is Jim Ryan here in the studio.
Hi.
What is your last name, please?
Cardona Rivera.
Oh, Cardona. Rosa Cardona Rivera. Tell us what you saw and heard, if you would, please.
Okay, I'm at 99 Hudson Street. I was standing outside, actually, at the side of the building smoking a cigarette. And I hear a plane, and I don't usually see planes in this area. Then all of a sudden I saw it go right into the to the World Trade Center, to the building.
So
right
you saw a plane crash into the side of the World Trade Center?
Yes, sir.
And
I'm like on the 14th floor, so I was just like looking out, because there's like a fire, something like fire staircase or something, just like a little balcony. And I saw it go right into the building, and I was like, oh my God, And and it was a big plane. It wasn't, a little plane. It was fairly big.
how big, can you tell us? Give us an idea.
I don't know. I would say it was like a plane that I board on to go,
So this wasn't just a small Piper Cub or something that had gone the wrong way, and of course, we would the weather, I take it, where you are is just about picture perfect.
Picture perfect, yes. It's very clear outside.
So there would be the suspicion then that anybody who would drive a plane smack into the middle of the World Trade Center would have done it on purpose.
It would seem that either that or they lost control, but I can't see something like that. I mean, it was like right into the building, so and it was coming low. Because if I were to see a plane that was going high, and then all right, but this was coming low, very visible.
Can you see the streets below the World Trade Center?
No, I cannot, because I'm on Hudson Street.
You're on Hudson?
Yeah, I'm on Hudson Street in Franklin. So
now you say you were out there grabbing a smoke when it happened?
Right.
What did the other people do when they heard the noise?
Well, there was nobody. I'm up on the 14th floor.
Oh, you were on the 14th floor.
Yeah,
I see.
So I'm not street level. I was up on the 14th floor, and I was just like looking out, just watching the scenery. And when I saw the plane.
All right, Rosa, thank you very much. Talking with eyewitness Rosa Cardona Rivera on the 14th floor of a building very close to the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. And once again, Dick Oliver was on the scene down at City Hall reporting to us. However, our transmitter is located on top of the World Trade Center building, so that apparently caused our picture from that remote to just go out on us. But once again, yes?
I was just saying, I can imagine what the people there must be going through, given what happened there. a decade ago.
Yes, Dave?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, if it indeed was a plane, the FAA or the control towers at one of the three major airports should have record of what's in the area. Sometimes they do vector planes around the southern tip of Manhattan. We might want to get a hold of Nick Gregory, who's a certified pilot and, again, flies through the area pretty regularly. Number two, even though planes typically are not that close to these buildings, with the possibility of anything from engine failure to hydraulic failure, you lose control of your ability to control aircraft. You can see right now probably police helicopters hovering right around the towers. But again, wind speeds at this point, not tremendous at all. Flying conditions near perfect.
And of course, they would have to, under ordinary circumstances, have filed some sort of a flight plan. If it were a plane that, and it apparently, according to the lady we spoke to, eyewitness just a few moments ago, she did see a plane go in there. Now, I'm told that it may be a twin-engine plane that simply smashed. It looks like it went head-on, smack into the World Trade Center building. One could only expect, given the weather conditions, given looking at that picture live right there, that it went smack inside the World Trade Center. And if that is the case, I'm afraid we've got a tragedy on our hands.
We've got something coming across the wire here, James, but actually it's nothing more than what you've already been reporting. Witnesses report hearing a huge explosion.
Yeah, well, we're looking at, there's no doubt there was a huge explosion and fire, lots of black smoke coming from that building. Black smoke, again, would indicate that the fire is nowhere near under control. I expect they have sprinkler systems in there.
Jim?
1 second, Dave. I'm told we have a witness named Jim on the phone, an eyewitness. Jim, are you there?
Yes.
Jim, what's your last name, Jim?
Last name's Friedel.
Jim, tell us what you saw, if you would.
Well, I was looking out the window, and normally you'll see planes kind of flying low over the Hudson, but this is a large plane. It's something like a 727, and it was banking, and the only reason I kind of looked at it is because I thought it was rather low. Banking very hard, and then it just drove right through the World Trade Center tower.
What's your vantage point there, Jim?
I am actually across the Hudson in Hoboken, but I have a clear view right at the World Trade Towers.
Now, it did seem to you that it was done on purpose?
You know, I don't know if I can say that, but it was a very odd type of turn. It was headed directly at the building. So whether that was on purpose or not, I can't tell. I don't know if he was trying to avoid or they were headed for it.
Describe that turn for us, would you? It was particularly heavily banked?
It was pretty heavily banked, maybe 45 degrees. Again, hard to tell. It was kind of unremarkable because you do see planes fly through here. It was a large plane, like a 727, and that's the only reason I kept looking, and then it went right into the building. I just thought it was going to follow the river and keep on going, but it didn't.
Now, after the plane struck the building, from your vantage point, it apparently went directly inside.
That's correct.
And if that's the case, my goodness.
Yeah, actually, as the impact occurred, you could see debris flying out the other side.
So it apparently went right through the... we're looking at a live picture of the building right now, Jim, and what would you say that would be, about the 90th floor or so?
Yeah, I can't tell if it went right through, but certainly debris was shot out the other side of the building.
Did you hear anything when it took place? Did you hear the crash?
Yes, I did. In terms of anything beforehand, though, no. I mean, I couldn't tell if the plane was in distress or anything like that, but certainly when it hit, there was a large explosion, and again, you had smoke and debris coming out the other side as well.
All right, Jim, thank you very much. Been talking to Jim Friedel, eyewitness who witnessed the crash from Hoboken. Thank you, Jim, very much for giving us what you saw and heard. Again, just a few minutes ago, apparently a large plane, according to that eyewitness, Jim Friedel, vantage point from Hoboken, that as you look at the picture from our chopper now arriving at the scene, Jim Friedel in Hoboken said it appeared to bank sharply and smash directly, perhaps purposefully, into, oh my goodness.
Oh God.
There's another one. Oh my goodness, there's another one.
This seems to be on purpose.
Oh my goodness,
Another plane?
Now it's obvious, I think, that there's a second plane just crashed into the World Trade Center. I think we have a terrorist act of proportions that we cannot begin to imagine at this juncture.
Oh my God.
My goodness. A second plane now has crashed into the other tower of the World Trade Center. Obviously, suicide, terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. What we have been fearing.
Chopper 5. Anybody on?
What we have been fearing for the longest time here apparently has come to pass. A disastrous terrorist attack on the World Trade Center, both towers, planes smashing into each one. I understand we've reestablished contact with Dick Oliver. Dick is on the phone.
Jim.
Yeah, Dick.
Jim, yes, just moments ago, as you know, another vehicle, some kind of an aircraft, crashed into the World Trade Center. This is no accident. This is no bomb from inside. This is, as you put it, a terrorist attack. There's no two ways about it.
Dick, what vantage point are you at now?
We're still at Park Row. People are streaming down, heading away from the World Trade Center. Having heard the second blast, people are running, some of them running now. Emergency vehicles still heading towards the World Trade Center. Now thick black smoke. I don't know if you've got a picture. We're trying to take some pictures here for you. Black smoke coming out of the second explosion. The first explosion seems to have calmed down somewhat.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, there's gray smoke coming out of it, meaning that the water is being put on it. People continue to stream past us here on Park Row, as well as emergency vehicles. There's an ambulance, there's a fire vehicle, and a police vehicle.
My goodness, Ollie, if I can only begin to imagine the carnage that has taken place. We see an ember falling from the top of the floor of the Empire State Building. It's tough to look at, but let's look at it once again. After a plane crashed into the side of the World Trade Center, then another one, as our cameras were focused on the building, crashed into the other tower.
Jim, there's now a very serious fire on the south tower of the World Trade Center. This is about, I would estimate, about the 60th or perhaps the 70th floor of the tower, right on the corner, the northeast corner of the south tower, flames shooting out of the building. We have absolutely no reports of who was in there, but you've got to believe that being around the 9 o'clock hour that people were just sitting down for a day's work in those buildings.
Jim, I was just thinking that if I'm not mistaken, remember several years ago, Mayor Giuliani moved the emergency management office to one of the higher, to the 30th floor or around that area of one of the towers of the World Trade Center, and that's indeed the brain of all the emergency management activity. And now,
I believe, though, that's in one of the other towers. Ollie, can you talk to that? Ollie, can you hear me?
I hear you, Jim.
Dave brought up the point that the mayor's emergency management office, the so-called bunker, is in one of the towers of the World Trade Center, but I don't believe it's one of the two top ones.
No, it's not. It's about the 30th floor. It is not up there. And by the way, for those who are wondering about the structure itself, both towers appear to be structurally sound, and not only small pieces of debris are circulating in the air around it where the explosions occurred. The buildings themselves seem to be intact as far as their structure is concerned. There have been talk over the years about the threat of terrorism making the buildings fall down onto the streets. But I can reassure everybody that they seem to be holding up fairly well while efforts are going forward to fight the fires and whatever happened in those two towers.
Now we can see smoke emanating from many of the floors of the two towers. We see to the left of your picture there smoke coming out of the floors above where the plane crashed into. I believe that's the north tower that we're looking at there.
Thousands of people gathered where I am here at City Hall Park, in front of City Hall, just watching what's going on. It's very difficult they come by and they say, what happened, what happened? And you just got to say something hit the building and then something hit both buildings.
Well, we saw clearly, we didn't see the first one, but we saw clearly that a plane deliberately crashed into one of the upper floors of the World Trade Center. That was the second plane. So 2 planes crashed into the upper floors of each of the World Trade Center towers. And I understand now that Port Authority headquarters are in one of those buildings somewhere near that location.
Jim, I don't know whether we've confirmed that this was an aircraft, or to be more specific, some people said they thought they saw a missile. I don't know how people could differentiate, but we might keep open the possibility that this was a missile attack on these buildings.
Ali, I must say that we have an eyewitness who said it was a large plane that crashed first, and then as we were watching the live picture here in the studio, we saw a plane crash into the other tower of the World Trade Center. And again, let's just to be sure, there it is. There it is. The plane went right through the other tower of the World Trade Center.
That is a very hard thing to watch.
And clearly untold carnage must be the result of those suicide terrorist activities.
That was a large commercial
plane.
jet.
The gentleman, Jim Friedel, the gentleman from Hoboken who was watching, said the first one looked to him like a 727.
Well, look at the wingspan, the swath it cut through the towers.
Yeah, lots of speculation, no doubt. And for years, we have been talking about security from terrorists here in this major city. It makes you wonder how, if it indeed were 2 planes, we did see one, how did they manage to get into the area and to
you
just
wonder,
hit the plane like that?
These are all the things that we're going to have to be answered. How could 2 large planes just that quickly get out of control from our local
presumably commercial aircraft. Now, we can't speak to the first one, but that second aircraft that went through looked like a large twin-engine or 3-engine jet. Those are simply not around for private aviation.
Yeah, that's not your Piper Cub.
No, it is not.
That's obviously designed to do considerable damage to those buildings on this day when we're holding a primary election in New York City.
Now, I would imagine...
Ollie?
Jim, what you're saying could be a drone aircraft. That's an aircraft that's guided electronically to its target without having a pilot. Now, that is a possibility as well. In the meantime, I can tell you that flames are shooting out of both towers now. The heaviest being on the south tower, the northeast corner of the south tower of the World Trade Center, but there's a considerable blaze going on the north tower as well.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any way of finding out exactly what is located on those upper floors. You'd like to just cross your fingers and pray to God that maybe there weren't a lot of people up there at that time.
State office buildings and, of course, lots of commercial office buildings on those spaces as well. I know during the last terrorist attack on the World Trade Center, my son was in the building, and he told stories of groping down through the staircases for some 50 floors before he, thank God, got out safely.
In fact, the governor has an office in the World Trade Center as well. There is one thing. After the bombing of the World Trade Center in the 90s, I do know that there were major efforts to have disaster drills, to have a preparedness plan in the event of an awful tragedy like this. But one has to wonder how, with 2 gigantic skyscrapers burning, the fire department and emergency services can handle both in that confined space without a tremendous death toll.
No matter how much you set in place, how much you try to prepare for, until it actually happens, it's just not the same thing.
Again, you're looking at a live picture of the World Trade Center, where shortly before 9 o'clock shortly before 9 o'clock this morning, and then shortly after 9 o'clock, planes apparently deliberately crashed into the buildings. Alani DeVito, are you there? Alani DeVito, are you there? I understand we have another eyewitness to this catastrophe. Lonnie DeVito, are you there? Apparently we lost Lonnie, but again...
This may be confusing to some people because in a sense it is a little confusing to me. We every now and then see what looks like, I don't know if it's the bottom of a chopper that is swinging back and forth.
That would be our...
That is ours.
That would be the rudders from our chopper every once in a while.
Hey, Jim.
Lonnie DeVito, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Lonnie. Thank you.
Hi.
This is Jim Ryan in the studio. Can you tell us what you heard and saw when the blast took place?
Right now, I was actually talking to my brother on the phone about what happened. I was on my roof and I saw something from where I am. I really can't see what it is. I saw something go into the other building because from where I am, I could see the World Trade Center. I run downstairs and I see on the news that it looks like another fighter jet is what it looks like. And from my house, I could see all the smoke that's into Dyker Heights. I could see all of that. It's ridiculous. I can't believe all of this is happening, honestly.
You say you're in Dyker Heights,
Yes.
Lonnie?
Yes.
Okay. And could you hear the blast from where you were?
No, I couldn't hear the blast, but I saw something, and it didn't look pretty. Exactly how I can't explain it in any other way. I'm in shock right now.
All right, Lonnie. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So obviously visible but not audible from way out in Dyker Heights.
Hey, Jim?
Yes, Ollie.
They appear to be getting water on this fire. If you can see the South Tower, the black smoke is getting progressively lighter. This indicates steam, which indicates that fire authorities are getting water on the flames. In the meantime, flames are still spitting out from both towers. Now, while the whatever hit the building crashed in the north side of the North Tower, we see flames coming out of the east side, facing Queens and Brooklyn, if you will. The flames on the South Tower, which appear to be getting lesser and lesser, is where the smoke is getting progressively lighter and lighter, indicating that the fire officials are getting closer to putting this fire out.
All right, Ollie, thank you. We are now told that the FBI had been investigating a plane hijacking before these crashes took place. So there is the possibility that perhaps one or more planes were hijacked out of one of the local airports and then taken and directly flown into the World Trade Center, smashing the buildings themselves, and Lord knows what carnage took place inside.
Jim, can you put out a note, or maybe I will myself? People have been coming up to me to try to reach their family and friends and relatives to tell them that they're okay. We ought to put it out that no one that we know of was hurt on the ground or in any place around the building, that this outrage appears to be concentrated on the buildings themselves. So anybody who has a relative or a friend in Lower Manhattan, they are not likely to have been affected physically by what happened here.
All right. Again, you're looking at a split screen, two different shots of the World Trade Center. Dave, you want to say something?
I would wonder at this point, given what's happened now, what you just mentioned about the FBI, the fact that it is now seemingly two planes, if the military or someone is going to scramble and try and protect the airspace around the southern tip of Manhattan, and indeed what the situation is out at the airports right now as well.
Funny, you should, not funny, but apropos, we are now given word that all three area airports are closed. So no activity whatsoever at LaGuardia, at Kennedy, or at Newark airports. Also, there is no subway service right now on the 1, 2, 3, 9, N, and R lines. So there is no subway service in and around the World Trade Center, and all three airports have closed. Just to bring you up to date, that as a result, I think we can say with fair amount of certainty right now, two planes, large, apparently commercial jets, deliberately crashed into first one tower of the World Trade Center then the other, just scant minutes apart. You're looking at live pictures now of the tops, two split-screen pictures of the tops of the World Trade Center, one from a fixed camera, one from our own Chopper 5. And obviously, that is in the middle of the work day. Perhaps there is some significance that it is a primary election day. I don't know. But that is in the middle of a work day. All those floors on both towers of the World Trade Center are certain to have been occupied. And it doesn't look very promising for anybody who was caught in that terrible, terrible
I'm sure,
terrorist
Jim,
act.
officials would also want to say.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Right
You just talking to me. Yes,
I'm sorry. You go right ahead.
They're talking to me in my ear, but you make your point.
If there is anyone who is heading into the city for any reason, if it's not an emergency, stay away from the city. Stay away from the downtown area.
By all means. Perhaps we can talk to Kai Simonson. Kai, can you hear me? All right, that's a live picture from Kai Simonson. I'll try once again. We've had communications difficulties. I'll say once again because our part of our communications setup is on the top of that World Trade Center building, and that was knocked out shortly after the first plane crashed into the first building. But Kai, can you hear me at all? Obviously, Kai having some communications problems.
Here.
Yes, Ollie?
I must tell you that small pieces, well, they look small from here, but they're probably much larger than I believe, are falling from the scene of the site of the two. There goes a piece. So the authorities are clearing the area around. We still have pieces of debris coming down. Not a lot, but every few moments, another piece of debris, looks like aluminum siding, comes flying down from the scene of the two fires.
Boy, again, the tower on the right of your screen seems to be fire seems to be dying down a little bit, but the fire to the left of your screen still heavy, thick, black smoke spewing out. We're just told now, we received words that the Lincoln Tunnel and the Holland Tunnel are both closed. So, just as an aftermath of this terrorist act, terrible terrorist act, the ones I suppose we feared for the longest time, there is no service in or out of any of the airports. The Lincoln and the Holland tunnels are both closed. There is no subway service at all through downtown Manhattan. The 1, 2, 3, 9, N, or any plane that goes near, any train rather, that goes near the World Trade Center has been discontinued. That as a result of what you see right there. Planes, two of them, one just minutes apart, one into one tower of the World Trade Center, the other into the other tower, causing devastation on the top floors of those buildings.
It wouldn't surprise me, Jim, even though right now we just have a tentative shutdown of the subway system, if indeed the mayor or authorities shut down transit, just given the fact that there may be threats or a potential problem securing all of the major thoroughfares and tunnels throughout the city, simply out of precaution. I would imagine that they might consider doing that over the next short term.
If there were two, there may be more. You couldn't be too careful at this point. I understand we have another eyewitness to the catastrophe. Shaniqua, are you there?
Yes.
Can you tell me what you saw and heard, please?
Okay, my grandmother's friend, she came upstairs and told us that they was bombing the Twin Towers. So me and my grandfather, we looked out the window and we actually saw the airplane crash into the second tower.
Vivikwa, could you do me a favor, please? Could you turn your television, set the sound down?
Okay.
Maybe we're having trouble hearing you. Perhaps that's the cause.
Is that good enough?
Tell us again, if you would. I'm not sure we quite hear you well enough.
Okay, my grandmother's friend, she came upstairs and she was telling us how they was bombing the tower. So me and my grandfather decided to look out the window, and we actually saw the second plane crash into the second tower. We thought it was the airplane, but we not, because we wasn't too actually sure what type of airplane it was, but we know it was the airplane. And we heard the explosion and saw the fire.
Right. All right, we're having trouble communicating with Vivico Cohen, an eyewitness, but again, FBI in Washington is reporting that they have had reports of planes hijacked before the crashes took place. So one would suspect, one would believe that the FBI was investigating hijacked planes when those planes were diverted smack into the World Trade Center, both towers. I'm told also that Mayor Giuliani is preparing to hold a news conference about the disaster. As soon as that happens, of course, we will bring it to you live. Dave? We might imagine, given that it's primary day, that the governor himself may also be in New York City on this date. Given the importance of the day municipally.
Well, if he isn't, I'm sure he's on his way.
One would hope that
absolutely
that he's not anywhere near that World Trade Center office. Ollie, anything new from your vantage point?
No, Jim, except that emergency vehicles are finding it difficult to get through, not only because of the crowds, but because of the pileup of emergency vehicles. As you know, we're at the south end of City Hall Park, and everything is pretty much frozen here, even though I have not seen ambulances come out of the scene. I have seen them go in. Hopefully that's a sign that there are not too many casualties as a result of this.
Thank you, Ollie.
Jim, do we have word, have they evacuated other landmark buildings like the Empire State Building, the Statue of Liberty, etc.? Do we know?
We have no word on that yet.
It just gives you such a horrible feeling that the city is under siege, which may not be true. This is enough with the World Trade Center, but it gives you such a helpless feeling.
Oh yeah, there's not much you can do at this point.
You also wonder if this is indeed a hijacking, if these planes were taken over, if the people who took over these planes actually were trained pilots and did the flying into these buildings themselves, or again forced these pilots to head on in.
That it would be an unusual pilot who would do that.
Exactly.
But I'm told we have another eyewitness, Tom O'Hara, on the phone. Tom, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you tell me what you heard and saw, please?
Actually, we were in our office building on 36th Street, and I went up to the penthouse where you have a straight downtown view. We saw the northwest tower on fire, and we saw either a slow-moving airplane go down, wrap around the tower, and then slam into the south tower in a ball of flames.
And from 36th Street, could you hear what was going on?
I couldn't hear, but we have a straight-on shot completely downtown of all of the goings-on the two buildings.
All right, Tom, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
So from 36th Street, looking across the tops of buildings, you can see it very clearly. We're told now that, in response to your point, Dave, that the city has shut down every place in and out of Manhattan. All the bridges, all the tunnels are closed. And again, all three airports are closed. So as a result of this double-barreled terrorist attack on the World Trade Center, the city has shut down the Holland Tunnel, the Lincoln Tunnel, the George Washington Bridge. Every way in and out of Manhattan is closed. And I presume that would be from, I'm sorry, and the East River crossings as well.
We are also told that the phone service in the building, we are having a problem with the phone service. The phones don't work. Joey was saying the cell phones, you can't get out on the cell phones,
cell phones
as
are
well.
out.
Yes.
This would be a good time to say, by the way, for those who are using the emergency services number 911 to somehow call and check on relatives or friends, this is the time, most importantly, when that line needs to be kept open for the true emergencies which are taking place in other parts of the city, and indeed down on the southern tip of Manhattan at this hour.
Good thought. Again, all this as a consequence of what you see right there. Recapping for you shortly before 9 o'clock and then shortly before after 9 o'clock, a plane apparently deliberately crashed into the upper floors of first one tower of the World Trade Center, then, as we were watching in horror, another tower of the World Trade Center. There you see the aftermath. And we have reports right now that the President of the United States, of course, this terrorist act not directed on us specifically here in New York City, but at the country. We are told that the President of the United States is preparing to go before the nation and comment on this disaster. You look the right side of your screen, the first tower of the World Trade Center seems slightly less engulfed in flames than the one on the left. That because that smoke seems to be much darker, indicating that the fire would be much more active. And I'm told that we have another eyewitness, Dan Lee. Are you there?
I am.
Dan, can you tell me what you heard and saw?
Yes, I was crossing 6th Avenue at West 4th Street, and there was a terrific noise overhead of a jet crossing over, which I noticed because it was incredibly irritating that it was that loud directly over Manhattan. And as I'm watching this jet, thinking, why is it so low, I see that it's heading right for the Trade Center. And sure enough, it hit the World Trade Center and completely disappeared into the building. I saw no debris falling, really. It just vanished right into the building.
Were there many people around you when it happened, Dan?
There were several people in the crosswalk at 6th Avenue and West 4th, yes.
What was their reaction?
We all just froze and stood in the middle of the street in disbelief watching, and traffic stopped because we were in the way. And we just stood there for quite some time in complete disbelief of what we had just seen.
Where were you when the second blast took place?
I had managed at that point to walk the half block home, and I was watching the coverage on television, and that's when I saw the live picture of the second blast.
All right,
happening.
Dan, thank you very much for giving us your thoughts. Here now, the President of the United States on this disaster.
Terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
All right, the President, before a moment of silence for the victims of this terrorist act, telling the nation that the full resources of the government would be brought to bear on helping the victims and on finding out who precisely is responsible for this terrible, terrible attack on our country. Right there you see the aftermath, the World Trade Center towers, smoke billowing out of the upper floors, all those floors, I'm sure, fully occupied. The rescue attempts going forward as much as is possible, given the high floors of the tallest buildings in Manhattan, and given the number of people there. Dave?
Jim, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you may be able to provide some historical perspective. How long have the Twin Towers been up? And once again, the floor height, the number of floors, I think is
off the top of my head, somewhere in the 60s, as I recall, and it goes up, 102 floors or so, up to the Windows on the World restaurant there.
And if we remember from the last bombing, it took months and months and months before that structure was certified sound again and re-inhabited by...
in from the bottom.
Right, that was a bombing from the parking garage level of the tower.
That is something that it's hard to watch this, but it's more bearable because I remember that particular bombing, and I was on the air all morning and all afternoon with that one, is that you saw the people that were being brought out on stretchers. You actually saw bodies and victims. And this, we're not seeing that yet, and we're hoping and praying that there are very few injuries. But just looking at this, it just, as you say, Jim, the carnage is just...
What we're looking at is just the long picture.
It would appear, Jim, as if there's more smoke coming from the ground at some point.
When we just have another, yes, things have fallen to the ground and are burning. And we have another announcement now that you might have expected, and that is the Empire State Building is being evacuated. You're making the point, Lynn, that we are only seeing the long picture, if you will. We are not able to see, perhaps thankfully, inside those buildings and see what kind of devastation has been caused. We're told we have a pilot on the line, Richard Kornacek. Are you there, Richard?
Yes, I am.
Richard, were you up in the air when this took place?
No, I wasn't, but we fly alongside those buildings regularly on what they call the VFR corridor that goes up and down the Hudson River.
And did you see the attacks this morning?
Yes, I did.
What was your vantage point, and what did you hear and see, if you would?
Well, it appears that to fly an airplane right next to the Empire State Building or the World Trade Center, it's perfectly legal. You can do it under what they call VFR rules. And where those airliners apparently came from, it's really hard to say, and they may not have even been talking to the controllers. It's possible that they were hijacked either, quite a distance away, or no one knows where they actually came from. But the ability to fly right next to the World Trade Center is always been available to any pilot who wanted to exercise that privilege.
Excuse me, but I just happen to live on the west side, and there's a regular route into LaGuardia that goes right up the Hudson River and then sort of banks right into LaGuardia. So it would not be unusual then to see planes flying near the World Trade Center, and as you say, Richard, it's not unusual. But these pilots must not have had any contact with the traffic control people or the FAA at all. Is that true?
Apparently not, because we've heard nothing contact with them. The airliners that come into LaGuardia when they're over the and that higher corridor, they're at maybe 2,000, 2,500 feet. But you are also allowed to go down below 1,000 feet along that corridor. And one of the things they may have done is shut off on the airplanes. They have what they call transponders, which allow the controllers to identify particularly the aircraft. And they may have shut them off so the controllers could not actually see the airplane very well.
I see.
They would only have what they call a primary target, where it would be very difficult to track them. They'd have to go back and look at their tapes to see exactly where they came from.
Richard, this is Lynn Brown sitting here with Jim Ryan. You are saying that you are allowed to fly a plane that close to these buildings?
Yes.
Any particular type of plane? I mean, is a plane that big flying next to this type of building, wouldn't that seem a little out of the ordinary?
That would be unusual because the airliners are all required to be on IFR flight plans, and they would not normally be allowed to fly that low. However, it doesn't mean that someone could, that it would be absolutely unusual for a plane to fly up and down the Hudson. But airliners routinely do not do that.
Richard, would you just stand by 1 second, please? Sure. I just want to tell the folks one thing, and that is the city fire department has now issued a request to all the members of the department, all firefighters, whether you're on your day off or whether you're on vacation. They're asking that you return to duty, that you go to your firehouse and report for duty. So the city is asking all firefighters, whether you're on vacation or whether you're on your day off or whatever, to return to your firehouse and report for duty. I'm sorry, Richard, are you still there?
Yes.
All right, Dave's got a question for you.
Richard, can you do me a favor and take us through exactly what happens as a plane takes off and circulates around that area? What contact they would typically have with the FAA or the tower at LaGuardia, Kennedy, or Newark? And exactly what would appear on a radar screen to those tracking aircraft in the area?
Well, let's say if you were taking off in a relatively small plane, say a twin-engine plane or a private aircraft, and you were coming in from the south, which apparently these came from. If they have specific areas, if you're coming in, let's say you were 20 miles out, there's no requirement that you be in radar contact with anyone or radio
Now,
contact.
Richard, I'm going to jump in. What if it were a larger aircraft? Because at least on that second hit to us, it appeared as if that was at least a twin-engine jet. What if you're a commercial aircraft?
Even a commercial aircraft is not required to always be on an instrument flight plan. They could take off what they call VFR flight rules, come up the New Jersey coast, and when they got within, say, 10 miles of New York City, they'd have to drop down below 1,600 feet. And VFR, they'd have to then drop down when they got to the Verrazano Bridge. They'd have to be below 1,100 feet.
My question is this. Would folks who are manning a tower, would personnel at the airports early on or relatively early on spot something alarming, that something that big was below a certain altitude or near one of these skyscrapers?
No, they wouldn't. If they came up from the south and they came up below those altitudes, even if they had their altitude reporting on, since they're below the level of where they control the airplanes, they wouldn't pay it any attention. They wouldn't have to, and normally it's not done. And realize that this is an extraordinary circumstance where apparently these planes appear to have been hijacked in some way or taken the control over them, and it basically must have been a suicide mission. Most of these aircraft accidents, when you look at them, most pilots can tell what really happened very quickly, even though the reports take a long time to come out. But the controllers, let's say the controllers that are actually controlling the airliners,
Richard, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you. I apologize to you, Richard, but we have another development. Thank you very much for your assistance. I appreciate it. Dick Oliver?
Yes, Jim. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Jim, I can tell you now that the police for the last several minutes have been evacuating all of lower Manhattan. I'm standing at the foot of City Hall Park, and I see people being screaming out of the lower Manhattan area. I'm looking down Broadway, and they're encouraged, move, please, please move. And they're moving them north towards the up Broadway and towards the Brooklyn Bridge. So virtually all of lower Manhattan is being evacuated at this time. All people except for emergency personnel are being asked to leave the area.
Ollie, that may tie in with another, I must emphasize, unconfirmed report that we have that there is yet another plane on its way. So, Lord knows we hope that is not the case, but we do have an unconfirmed report that another plane might be on its way. We have an eyewitness from our own staff. Hi, kid, how you doing?
Hi, Jim. I was in my apartment. I live on the 36th floor at 59th Street in Columbus, and I have a clear view of downtown, and I can see the towers. And I was in my living room. I was getting dressed to rush in here, and I saw one tower. It had all the smoke. And then I saw another plane that was really close, and it went behind, and you can see it doing a turn. It was turning its wings, and it went around, and then I saw it go into the other tower, and I saw a big pool of flames just come out, and there was a big explosion. I didn't hear anything, because I'm at 59th Street, but you could see it, and there were flames, and there was so much smoke, and you can see that it was an entire different building. But I saw it. It was a different plane.
So two different planes?
Absolutely.
Now, when you left your building, you went downstairs to come in here. What kind of a reaction did you encounter on the streets? Were people aware of it? Were people frightened by it?
Absolutely, people are aware of it. I mean, just walking here, I was hearing people saying, it was one plane, it was two plane, and everyone was hearing sirens. And people, I know people were trying to use their cell phones. No one could get a cell out. And my taxi driver was talking about it. And he had the radio up, and when we would stop, he would put his window down and tell the other guy. So everybody knows knows about it, I think, at this point, and they're talking about it.
Deb, we just got word that from the Associated Press that it's pretty sure now that one of those planes, the first one to hit, was hijacked after takeoff from Boston. So that word we have just in. The first plane that hit the World Trade Center, the North Tower, was hijacked en route from Boston, and presumably that's a commercial jet, and there were people on board as well. So this is nothing but a terrible tragedy. I'm sorry for interrupting you, Deb. You were
That's
saying.
okay. I can just say that that plane that I saw, the second plane, that was definitely a larger plane. I can't say which kind, but that was not a small plane. That was definitely a large plane.
So the first one was large enough, and the second one was much larger. You
Well,
said.
I didn't see the first one.
Oh,
I can just
the
vouch for the
second
one
one.
I
I see.
saw, and that one was certainly a large plane.
When you saw the plane, though, did you get a sense that it was heading directly for the building?
You know, when I saw it, I was thinking, gosh, that's really low. I thought it was part of the, of the recovery effort. And then I saw it, make a turn, and I was wondering what it would be doing, but then I saw it come around and hit the other side, and then huge flames, huge flames.
Deb, I'm going to have to interrupt you, I'm afraid, but the dimensions of this catastrophe are growing. We are told now that this is not quite confirmed yet, but we are told fairly reliably that a plane has crashed into the Pentagon in Washington. So not only have we had a terrible catastrophe here in New York, where planes crashed into both towers of the World Trade Center, but we are told now that a plane has crashed into the military complex in Washington, the Pentagon, which of course houses the nerve center of all the military operations of this country. So a 1, 2, 3 attack on the United States apparently today. 2 here in New York and 1 in Washington at the Pentagon. There you see a live picture from Washington. We would have to guess that that smoke is emanating from the Pentagon in the background. So the military nerve center of this country has been attacked by terrorists.
We don't know precisely the circumstances there.
And because of that, we are told that the White House has now been evacuated.
Explosions at the World Trade Center here in New York, where 2 planes slammed into the buildings.
I would imagine.
Okay, that's the picture in Washington. So now we can say with certainty that there have been at least 3 attacks on visible symbols of our country. 2 here in New York and 1 in Washington. You're looking at 2 different views of the World Trade Center, where planes, first one tower and then another plane, a larger plane, into the other tower, crashed just before and after 9 o'clock. And then just moments ago, a third plane crashed into the Pentagon, which, as you know, houses the nerve center of our military might. And that certainly is an unprecedented attack upon this country. One would presume by suicidal terrorists, and I imagine we will find out soon enough who staged this attack and what will be done about it.
We're getting something on the wire also about the stock exchange, which planned to open this morning at 10. Is delaying a half an hour, so we've got developments all over the place. And I don't know about your computers now. I'm starting to have a problem with my computer. It is just randomly jumping from one story to the other.
Given going forward, as there are, I think, stories are incoming on a very rapid basis. So that would be the.
Given what we're seeing at this point, I would imagine major buildings in major cities, from the Sears Tower in Chicago to other symbols, as you mentioned, Jim, in Washington and Boston, I would imagine are all going to be on high alert, if not evacuated and watched.
The West Wing of the White House and the Capitol building have both been evacuated.
Okay, so in Washington, just to recap now, on this terrible, terrible day, here in New York, you happen to be looking at a picture in Washington, so we'll start with that. That's in Washington. A plane has struck the Pentagon in Washington, And that, of course, houses our military nerve center. And that has taken place, and the Pentagon now obviously being evacuated. The West Wing of the White House is being evacuated. And here in New York, 2 terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center. A plane deliberately smashed into the upper floors, first of one tower, and then several minutes later, the other tower. 2 large planes. We understand the second one, or the first one rather, was hijacked from Boston and presumably loaded with passengers. So as a consequence of these terrorist attacks here in New York, we have the island of Manhattan virtually isolated. You cannot get in or out of Manhattan by any bridge or any tunnel. And any subway train that goes anywhere near the World Trade Center is not running. All right, Dick Oliver was fairly close to the scene when it happened. He was reporting on what is now an afterthought to this day, the primary election, down at City Hall when the blasts took place. Ollie? I don't know if Ollie is... we again, our part of our television operation is on top of the World Trade Center, so we lost the picture. Yes, you're coming to us by phone. Ollie?
Yeah, Jim, I hear you now. I'm down by the Brooklyn Bridge now, where people are streaming over the bridge, heading towards Brooklyn, obviously. The police are encouraging people to get out of lower Manhattan. So that's going on now. There are some cars being permitted to clear away to allow more and more pedestrians to get over the Brooklyn Bridge.
Is there any vehicular traffic on the bridge, Ollie?
There's just a little bit coming off on the side ramps. The south ramp has some traffic on it, but that's going very, very slowly. The pedestrians have taken over the entire bridge, almost the entire bridge. Now, as far as the first blast is concerned, I did hear some kind of a scream. Just a split second before that tremendous blast. And I did not know it was an aircraft. I did not know what it was. But you were able to confirm what happened with the second explosion in the second tower.
Ollie, let me just interrupt you for a second, if I may. We are told now that the White House has been threatened with a terrorist attack. Maybe some sort of a verbal threat, I don't know, but one would assume that the White House, given the fact that the Pentagon was under attack and these World Trade Center was under attack, this country is under attack by terrorists, both here in New York and in Washington. And just moments ago, the President of the United States went in before the nation to make this announcement. I understand we're going to rerun the bite of the president. Okay, here it is.
Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence.
All right, that was the president just a few minutes ago announcing that the full resources of the government would be put to help the victims of these tragedies and to find out who did it. And I'm also told now that the FAA has announced from Washington that no aircraft anywhere in the country is being allowed to take off. That from the FAA, because apparently these 2 planes that smashed into the World Trade Center, and perhaps the one in the Pentagon as well, were hijacked, commercial jets from various airports. So as a result of that, the FAA has announced that no aircraft is being allowed to take off anywhere in the country.
All right, Jim, we do have someone who has just joined us on the set here. His name is Joseph Jaffe. And Mr. Jaffe, where are you from?
Decision Strategies Fairfax. We're an investigative consulting and security firm.
All right.
What do you make of this?
Well, it's a tragedy, and it appears, if it didn't appear first from the first plane, after the second plane, and now the one at the Pentagon, that there's a well-coordinated effort afoot to bring terrorism to the United States.
What could have been done, if anything, to prevent this kind of an attack?
At this juncture, it's very hard to guess. We have a country that's wide open. We have borders that are wide open. We have freedoms that are wide open. And over the past 25 and 30 years, some of us have been following terrorism for at least that long. Our country does not generally get into the investigation of terrorism the way it ought to, in terms of being the state that could prevent it. We value our freedom more, so there's very little you can do to take a person who's bent on killing himself or herself from taking over a plane. I mean, of course, you could enforce measures and be very strict on who gets onto what planes and how that would work. But that isn't going to work in this country.
I'm told, Mr. Jaffe, that we have is it a picture of the Pentagon? Let's just take this is a picture of the central military headquarters of our country, the Pentagon of the United States.
Apparently, the president.
This is the president's plane taking off from Florida, where he had been heading back to Washington to deal with the emergency. Mr. Jaffe, Dave, you had a question?
Well, two things. Number one, I was going to ask Mr. Jaffe, you said you're either based out of Fairfax or your company is down...
we have our company's in New York and in Falls Church, Virginia.
Okay, Falls Church, Virginia. You would very well know, as anyone who flies into the Washington area, what's stunning about the Pentagon attack is the airspace. While we do have a wide open country, the airspace around the Pentagon, the White House, the national monuments down there is extremely restricted. So number one, does it surprise you that an aircraft was able to get into, literally right into, the Pentagon? And number two, does it surprise you, since the attack on the World Trade Center back in the early 90s, that this has taken so long for terrorism to once again return to our domestic locale?
If you recall, over the last few years, there have been a number of people interdicted coming out of Canada, coming out of Brunswick, coming across various parts of the northern country, where people have been caught with the components to make the bombs. So it doesn't surprise me that we are the target of an attack. It surprises me that it's taken as long for us to suffer what we've suffered, and it creates a very heightened awareness of what we have to do now. The question becomes, do we sacrifice our complete freedoms in order to not suffer this? There's got to be a balance. But
I'm just interrupt you for a second, Mr. Jaffe. Just want to report to our viewers that we have reports now that the Capitol and the Treasury and the White House are being evacuated in Washington. Continue your thoughts, sir.
Have we been looking in the wrong places? We've been looking at terrorism in other areas. Have we been looking at them and neglecting our own backyard?
You could surmise that. Years ago, there were a whole host of different groups that started with Francis Tavern bombing, LaGuardia bombing, and others which we worked on. And then there was a very complete effort, at least in New York City and other places, to penetrate those organizations. I can't speak of what's been ongoing recently as to what we've penetrated, but we might have to sacrifice some of what we have by way of rights, at least to allow intelligence to be gathered so we can prevent some type of tragedy such as this. We need to look at home.
Apparently we got blindsided by this one. We were looking at a picture now. The one on the left is the Pentagon, and the one on the right is the World Trade Center. What, if you could take an educated guess, Mr. Jaffe, and say what kind of restrictions will now be placed upon the citizens of this country in order to combat terrorists, things like this?
Well, if we look at airports, our security is probably not the highest of all the countries in the world. And if we're worried about planes and commercial planes and hijacking, we could increase the types of things we did when the hijackings were so prevalent. But if we're looking at small planes and other things, it's very hard to stop that.
Now, watching terrorism as you have for as long as you have, is it odd that at this point, and maybe we have and simply don't know, that we don't have a name tag attached, a claim attached, a political group attached to what has happened within the last 2 hours or so. And what is the aim then, if it is not immediately to say, we did this, this is our cause?
I don't think it's odd. I think depending on who it is that's involved, they may have different reasons for deciding when to go public. But you don't need a claim. The purpose of terrorism, at least here, is to do just that, to get the people unnerved, to get business unsettled, to get the country totally taken apart and worried. And to that extent, right now, that appears successful. The city is worried.
We are a nation right now worried. The FAA has shut down all airplane traffic nationwide. We are paralyzed as a nation right now. I mean, of course, people can get in their cars and drive, but no one can fly, and I'm surprised that we haven't heard anything about the railways.
Well, I don't know. I understand, at least in our city, the subways, at least some of the lines are now closed. I think people have trepidation about going underground. They don't want to be there.
Absolutely.
If we suffer a short-term setback because we need to increase the security, we won't be a paralyzed country. If we go through and say we can't move, then the terrorism will have its effect. And so the thing that we have to do is literally not panic, see that it's a disaster to some extent, and go on with business. Because if we don't, then the acts that they've now done, I mean, the World Trade Center's been targeted before, it's been hit before, and for a short term, if you recall, the city was paralyzed then. We can't allow ourselves to be paralyzed. That would just give in and create the effect they want.
They've hit the Pentagon, the White House is being evacuated.
I would assume that most structures of any moment and most tunnels of any moment in any place.
Take a look at that, if you would, Mr. Jaffe. That's the live picture of the Pentagon,
Excuse me.
having been hit by an attack. Again, in Washington, they're told no, that's not the Pentagon. No,
we just heard that there was another explosion in the basement or one of the lower levels of the World Trade Center.
Well, that would it would seem from that picture that you're right there, Dave, because we see.
From the bottom.
We don't know if that's anything that's fallout from the planes striking doing.
Yeah.
News coverage event.
Could be as a consequence of perhaps something falling from, but it certainly looks like an awful lot of smoke to be.
And we are now, for the first time, beginning to get some pictures of people in the streets.
Yeah, this is
our area.
This is our live picture from the scene. Now we saw earlier the smoke. It's considerably less black than it was a few minutes ago, indicating that they're making some progress in putting those flames out. But now there seems to be a lot of smoke coming from the lower portion of the World Trade Center. And again, we had a report.
A new black smoke.
We had a report indicating that there was an explosion on the lower floors now.
We were talking.
Perhaps,
sorry, James.
We can't communicate with Dick Oliver. He is down somewhere in that area, but the only audio contact we have with him is by cell telephone, and we're having problems with those as well. So there's a live picture. All right, Brandy, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am, sir.
Brandy, where are you now?
I am in Clinton Hill, Brooklyn. I live on the 15th floor.
Yeah.
I have a terrace that faces the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
If I am home and all of the lights are on, if one floor turns out all of their lights, I can see that one floor turn out. I can see everything. I was in my bed this morning. My whole building shook. I got up, looked to see what was going on. Everything was up in flames. 10 minutes later, not literally, the other plane, I swear to you, deliberately went into the next World Trade Center building. Deliberately. It was no mistake about it. It deliberately went in there. I have a clear view of everything. Just 2 seconds ago, half of the building just fell out. There's nothing but white smoke. I can no longer see the World Trade Center now. It's all up in smoke. The smoke is on my terrace. That's how close I am. My mom is coughing because the smoke is on my terrace.
And you're across the bay in Brooklyn.
I'm across the bay in Brooklyn. I can see everything. We're in Clinton Hill, Brooklyn. This is the scariest thing that I've ever seen in my entire life. It was like television.
Now, when you said it seemed as if the side had fallen off the building?
The side of the building has fallen out. It seemed like there was another explosion. I heard something go boom, and everything just like fell out.
Is that a third explosion now?
I don't know if it was a third explosion or was it from the fire. The fire.
No, you saw you heard the first explosion, and you saw the second plane go in.
I saw the second plane go in, and it was actual deliberate. There is no way, as a pilot, that you would not drive around that smoke.
Brandy, after you saw that second plane hit deliberately, as you say, the side of the World Trade Center, then you heard a third explosion?
Then I heard not necessarily a third explosion. Just 10 minutes ago, like a whole side of the building just fell out.
I see.
And I could hear like the rumble, the crash of all the windows coming down.
So that could indicate some sort of a weakness, the structure
now,
of the building weakened.
I can't even see the World Trade Center building.
It's too much covered with smoke.
It's too much covered with smoke.
I see. Well,
I mean, the smoke is coming on my terrace. That's how much smoke it is.
I see. Brandy, thank you very much. I'm sure it was a harrowing experience for you, so thank you for sharing your experiences with us. I appreciate it. Mr. Jaffe, can we talk, your firm again is?
Decision Strategies, Fairfax.
Decision Strategies. As we look at a picture of the smoke coming from the Pentagon building in Washington, we now head into perhaps a new era in this country as far as protection against terrorist activity is concerned. Do you think that's a fair statement?
I think we're going to have a very heightened awareness. I think we have to in terms of protecting the things that are basic to us. I think we have to be careful, though, not to overdo it to the point that we wind up compromising completely what we've come to expect. If we overreact and take away the basic liberties we need, we'll have a problem. On the other hand, we can be very, very concerned, very concise, and do what we need to do and still be respectful of what the country stands for. But the most important piece, I think.
Okay, I'm sorry for interrupting you all the time, but what we heard from Brandy just a few minutes ago apparently has now been confirmed that a portion of the side of the World Trade Center has indeed collapsed. Now, whether that's just the outer wall or whether that goes right into the offices, I don't know. But you're looking at a live picture there, and smoke is emanating from the entire building. And we had Brandy on the phone just a short time ago from Brooklyn, and she said that she heard some sort of, she didn't know whether it was an explosion or not, but certainly a very loud sound. And then the side of the building, she said, just gave way. And you see all the smoke now. She says from her vantage point in Brooklyn, all she can see is smoke. Brandy, are you still with us by any chance? Yeah, apparently she's we're joined by Rosanna Scotto. Good morning, Rosanna.
Morning, Jim. You know, we knew we were going to have a big day today with the primaries. That has obviously taken a back seat right now. What we are hearing is the Board of Elections are meeting right now to determine whether to call off the primary today. And this is unprecedented. This has never happened. Now, if it was a general election, there is stipulations in the charter which say some kind of act of that we don't know of in nature, you can call it off. But for a primary, there's nothing in the charter that says you can call it off. But obviously, there are a lot of polling stations down in that area of the World Trade Center, and if not inside the Trade Center. And obviously, those are closed right now. So we will know in the next hour or so whether the primary has been postponed for a day or so.
Yeah, I don't see how they could go forward with it.
No, not at all, because it lost its
that would be a long shot.
Yeah,
and certainly only from a standpoint of, if not from a standpoint of polling places being closed, but from people losing interest in an election or in the face of an overwhelming tragedy.
I just left my home to come here, and it's really kind of scary because all you hear are the constant screams of ambulances and fire trucks racing through the street. Anybody, I was walking trying to get to a bus or a taxi or anything to get here, and all anybody could talk about was, what's going on? Do you have any information? It is the talk of the town right now, and rightly so. My husband, as you know, works down near the World Trade Center. He called me a little after 9 o'clock this morning. He had just gotten into his building. He was walking up the steps, and he heard a loud bang. He said it felt like an earthquake, and all of a sudden, he said it looked like confetti coming from the sky. Now, he's a few blocks away. And He didn't know what it was. He went up into his office. He has a clear view of the World Trade Center from there, and he claims he saw either people falling out of the building or jumping out of the building this morning. And my husband is pretty unflappable. He's an attorney. He was shaken up this morning.
Excuse me 1 second, Rosanna, because I think we're about to see a picture of, this is a few moments ago. Watch this. This is the side of the building just collapsing. There you see. There you see. Now, whether that is the result of just further weakening of the structure of the building, or whether that's yet another terrorist attack, I don't know. I would imagine the former, that the building structure just weakens to the point where the wall no longer able to sustain the weight, just caved. But that was the east side of the north tower of the World Trade Center caving in. And just a few moments ago, we had a woman named Brandy on the phone, and she told us it was another loud roar, and she told us
jets, copy.
Also, this is Kai, can you hear me? Kai, tell us what we're looking at here. These are fighter jets, one would presume, to prevent any further attacks by planes. If they see any plane coming now, it better not be an innocent commercial flight, because I should imagine those fighter jets are up there to intercept and shoot down any plane that comes their way.
No, I think everything has been grounded.
That's right. All the airports across the country
closed.
have been closed. And I heard that right now they're inspecting, and really inspecting, Air Force One, because it's been around this morning, and before the president gets on it, they want to make sure that it's a safe plane to get on.
Okay.
Okay. This is Chopper 5 to Corporon and Wolf. Corporon and Wolf. The studio's requesting exact locations from you guys. They want to know where you are.
Kai, can you hear me? Kai Simonson? Now, we're getting audio from Kai, but apparently he cannot hear me. If somebody can tell him to tell us what he sees from his vantage point and what's going on up in the air there, we'd appreciate it. Yeah.
This is Chopper 5 to Corporon and Wolf. Corporon and Wolf. What are your locations?
All right. He's talking to the assignment folks here at Channel 5, trying to set up some sort of contact. So apparently we can hear him, but he cannot hear us. So we have no way to tell him to talk to us.
Well, a lot of our communication stuff is on top of the World Trade Center.
Yep.
So I imagine all TV stations, all cell phones, all that stuff that we rely on every day are, a big problem right now.
There's some of the folks standing on the ground wondering what to make of all this. Again, shortly before 9 o'clock this morning, the first of 3 terrorist attacks on this country, 2 here in New York, 1 in Washington. A plane slammed into the upper floors of the North Tower of the World Trade Center, and then a few minutes later, another plane, pretty large planes as well.
You sit here and you look at this, and
just for a second,
go right ahead,
that second explosion took place when a second plane went in. Then a third explosion took place at the Pentagon, and now there are unconfirmed reports that a fourth explosion, the second at the Pentagon, has also taken place. So we're flying by the seat of our pants here, trying to keep up with this terrible terrorist activity. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Not at all, James. I'm just saying, you sit here and you look at this, and as journalists, you are not supposed to inject any of your personal feelings. But I'm sitting here, I'm looking at this, and I'm mad as hell. I really am. I am so angry that something like this could take place in our country.
Disrupt our lives, yeah.
Well, I think it's also frightening. I mean, let's face it, we're journalists, but we also live in this city.
Thank you.
We have children that we're raising in this city, so we have concerns just like everybody else, and we want to keep this place safe. And who would think in our lifetime that we would see something like this?
Yeah. Should we have been aware of this, Mr. Jaffe? Should we have been some inkling? Because apparently we got blindsided here.
I would think, and the government has various motives, and each of the various pieces of the government have other intelligence sources, but I would hope that we would be on top of some of this. And in years past, sometimes we weren't, but at least we had an inkling. It seems to me one of the things we have to do is to increase our intelligence gathering faculties domestically as well as overseas, especially domestically. And that may frighten some people because they don't want to have their rights compromised. On the other hand, we have to give up something in order to be safe. To the extent that they've accomplished our becoming fearful and you becoming angry, they've created a situation we have to rectify, and we have to do it quickly.
Do you think the FBI is going to come under a lot of fire for letting something like this slip? This obviously seems like a well-planned attack on New York and Washington, and we don't know.
Allow me to interrupt you, please. This is Rick Leventhal with Fox News Channel.
This way. The smoke is obviously cleared somewhat. Ma'am, she's with DCPI. Can you talk to us for just a second? Bring us up to speed. Obviously, people have their hands full out here. It's not easy getting anyone to talk.
Hey, Rick.
Yeah, tell me where you were. What happened? What did you see? What did you hear?
First, I went on Canal Street. I saw the fire. I saw the two buildings. I think it was a bomb because two of them. Anyway, when I got there, I tried to save people because I'm a doctor. When I tried to save people, in the moment we heard a big explosion coming down. Everything just went black. Everything came down, glass started popping. People got hurt. Stuff went on top of them, and it was a big explosion. And everything got dark, real dark, like snow. You can see behind me. Oh, this is not snow. This is all from the building. It was a terrible nightmare.
Where exactly were you standing when this happened?
I was standing right in front of the World Trade Center.
So you were down the block here? And
Right
you came
there in the
running this
middle.
way?
Right, yeah.
Did you get hurt at all?
No, not me.
Did you see anyone around you getting caught up in it?
Yeah, I was with the firemen. We got hurt. We all went inside to this dark. We was inside the building when everything happened, but we came out alive.
What's your name?
My name is Dr. Angel.
Were you able to assist anyone before this happened?
Yes, I did. I help a lot of patients. A lot of them.
Well, there are a lot more people that need help now.
Need help,
so
yeah.
if you're capable, maybe you should.
Yes, I'm gonna go back. I lost my ID, but I try to go back.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks a lot for talking to us.
Thanks.
We can you talk to us for a second? Jesus, just. Huh?
I saw a Trade Center come down.
Well, tell me what you saw.
All right, I was coming down 6th Avenue, running down to meet this truck.
Pat Muskoff, Fox News engineer. Go ahead. Go ahead. Start again.
I'm coming down 6th Avenue. All the traffic, all the people traffic was running up. And I'm looking up, I'm trying to call the station, trying to find where we are. And I look up and the tower just starts crumbling down. And everybody in the street just stops and started crying and bawling. And I'm standing next to a fireman, he said, yeah, they just bombed the Pentagon too. So that's basically where I saw. Then I came running down here. Traffic's not allowed past Warren Street. And you see what's here.
Do you know which of the two towers?
The one without the main antenna on it. The second one that was hit.
That's the further south? This more southerly tower?
I think it's Tower 1. I'm not too sure the exact.
And you actually saw it from the top down collapsing?
I saw it came sideways like this. It just collapsed in on top of itself. It was amazing, but very upsetting to watch. The whole thing come tumbling down. So we all thought it was another explosion. Then we looked up. Instead of being two, there's one.
Just an unbelievable scene here. It's almost difficult to describe what's going on here. It's unbelievable. You can see that we have one World Trade Center completely engulfed in flames. The upper floor is completely engulfed in flames. Two World Trade Center has collapsed. It collapsed, I guess, about 15 minutes or so ago. We had two planes, as you've been hearing. One plane hit One World Trade a short time ago. I guess it's going back about 45 minutes to maybe to an hour or so ago. And then shortly after that, another plane. We actually witnessed the plane coming up the East River, and it seemed to be getting dangerously close to World Trade, and we thought that it was going to hit, and it did in fact hit. We saw the explosion and all of the debris flowing down toward the lower Manhattan there, and it's just incredible how right now what we see on the ground down here is that the entire area of lower Manhattan right now is completely engulfed in a big black cloud of smoke. Now we did have some people down there that were shooting some tape for us. They said that the entire area is completely engulfed in smoke right now. It's very, very difficult to see at this point. And right now our concerns in terms of what we're doing up here is that the area, as we understand it, has been sealed off. The airspace has been sealed off. So they are not allowing people to come in and out of the airspace at this point. We are able to stay here right now, but no commercial traffic is being allowed to exit or enter the airspace right now. And we did hear some reports that there were hundreds of people. We did hear reports that there were hundreds of people, if not more, on the ground that were injured. There are obviously numerous casualties involved in all of this. Now, in terms of flying right now, our concern right now is just basically keep an eye out for any planes, any suspicious planes that enter the airspace. Right now, by definition, any plane that we see enter the airspace, if it's not an American fighter jet, which we have seen, or if it's not a news helicopter or a police helicopter, is suspicious at this point, and we need to get out of their way.
77th floor in One World Trade. You were in the building?
Yes. We did not see the debris hit anything specific on the ground because we are being kept at a distance right now. We're being kept at 3-4 miles away. Actually, I'm being told now by my pilot we're being kept at a minimum of 5 mile radius of the World Trade Center. That is for our own safety and also for the safety of the people on the ground. The debris, it's very, very difficult to determine which way the debris fell. It may have fallen toward the east, but I'm really not sure at this point which way the building collapsed. It was very difficult to see. It kind of erupted in a big cloud of dust and smoke at this point, so it was very difficult to see which way the debris fell, but it did appear that it may have fallen over toward the east side of the island. You can see it's an incredible scene here. It's almost the entire southern tip of Manhattan completely engulfed in smoke at this point. And we are told that it is virtually impossible to see down there. I can only imagine what emergency crews are going through at this point, not being able to see, trying to fight a fire. Right now, it's just kind of a moot point. Basically, I would think that right now the priority is just to preserve life at this point. The fire continues to burn at the top of One World Trade. 2 World Trade, as I told you a little bit earlier, collapsed, and it appeared as though it was collapsing over toward the east side of the island, but that has not been confirmed. I can't be sure of that completely. But just an incredible scene out here. It's really almost difficult to describe.
Again, the words of Kai Simonson, who is up in the air in Chapter 5. He was up in the air with his camera focused on the building when the second plane rammed into the World Trade Center, and it must have been it must have been quite a sight for him and quite an experience.
So, Jim,
I'm told Mario Bosques, excuse me, Rosanna, but I'm told Mario Bosques is on the phone from Beth Israel Hospital. Mario?
Hello, Jim. I'm at Beth Israel Medical Center, as you said, in downtown Manhattan. On the east side, along with Bellevue Medical Center, has become a staging area to receive the injured, the victims from, of course, the World Trade Center situation, the tragedy that took place there. We are seeing many ambulances pulling up with people coming on wheelchairs and stretchers, bandaged about the head and arms and legs. They don't appear at this point to be major injuries, but they appear to be stunned as they're taken out of the hospital, out of the ambulance into the hospital. We understand Bellevue at this point is also receiving people, doing triage there as well. Again, Beth Israel and Bellevue taking in victims apparently from the World Trade Center. In addition, Jim, people on the streets, I can tell you, along First Avenue walking around totally stunned. The TV sets in some shops are turned on loud, pointed out toward the streets as people come out of their apartments to watch these developments as they unfold. But again, at Beth Israel, they have many ambulances that are standing by to go to the area. We also understand Beekman Hospital is where many of the injured. I was running my way there to try to get coverage there when I stopped at Beth Israel to get the situation here. And as you might imagine, medical personnel are running around the area preparing to take in more victims.
I'm sure they will. By the way, I should tell the viewers, Mario, that you're looking at the picture on Fox News Channel. They have a reporter on the ground. Perhaps we could listen to that interview.
It's in World Financial Center. Right across the street, World Financial Center is right across the street from the Marriott Hotel. And when we were walking by, you look at the Marriott Hotel, I don't even think it's there anymore.
So, well, I don't know what else to ask you. I mean, it's just an incredible story. It's just horrible.
It's an absolute shame.
Do you think you know people who were on the floors that were hit?
You just pray when they evacuated people. Unfortunately, they evacuated people both sides of the World Financial Center. I don't know if if you're talking talking about the other side. We were by the water, by the ferries and Morans in that area. You just hope the people on the other side, they've actually evacuated them out, and that's the fear, I guess, with this building here. You just see the fire, like 20 stories. You worry about the building giving out, and it did.
How far away from the building were you when it collapsed?
I was right by where the people get on for the ferry, right next to Morans, to the right of Morans.
So 10 blocks, 20 blocks?
10 blocks away. And then there was a decent crowd, and that's when everyone just dispersed.
All right. Thanks for talking to us.
Thank you. I appreciate it. What's your name?
All right, Rick Leventhal.
Where are you from?
With Fox News Channel.
As Rick Leventhal continues to report from the streets of Manhattan, as this devastation occurs and continues to unfold, and you can see on the right-hand side of your screen, there is only one.
Can they hear?
There you're listening to the Fox News Channel, their coverage of the catastrophe. But I must say, and I hate to say this, but we had eyewitness reports earlier on that the World Trade Center being 110 stories high, there were people who were falling from the windows and who were jumping. Let's listen to this interview from Rick Leventhal.
We thought the building was going to topple over. It was going so.
Well, one of them did.
One of them did. We were in town one. We made it out.
Well, you're a lucky man.
Thank you very much. Okay, thanks.
All right, take care.
Clearly, this is a nationwide catastrophe, but folks...
Rick Leventhal talking to several eyewitnesses down there. That looks like another gentleman.
Call your loved ones. If you have any other way, perhaps email. If you have any other way of contacting
we're not listening to the interview on Fox News Channel, so we'll come back.
James, can I just step in 1 second? We do have reports that the State Department has been hit.
So virtually every important office building in Washington State, Treasury. Yes. Too late for the Pentagon because the attack has already hit there, but that is being evacuated as well.
And we should mention that the New York City Fire Department is appealing to anyone who's off duty or on vacation. Please, if you're a fire person, please report to work immediately. They need your help. Obviously, after we saw the planes hit the building, we kind of thought everything was over. It's not over. One tower has collapsed. People on the ground are getting hurt, if not killed. The story just seems not to be anywhere near ending.
Well, listen to this.
Flying out of the sky and you can't do nothing about it. You tell me. You tell me what you think. I mean, my heart's in my mouth. I mean, I pray for these people. There's no words to describe what's going on out there. I mean, you see bodies just coming a half hour later, still coming out of the goddamn sky. Devastating. Devastating. I can't imagine anything worse than this. There's got to be... I can't imagine. Everybody on the plane must have died. The floor, I got friends of mine on 104th floor, friends on other buildings. I just spoke to one of my friends a half hour prior to that, getting ready to go upstairs to go to work. It's devastating. I mean, I've seen a lot of construction accidents. I've seen a lot of bad things happen. Never seen a jet fall out of the sky into a building, no less once, but twice. Devastating.
I want to bring into the conversation...
we'll just add to what that gentleman said, that there is reason to feel that way because he mentioned that the plane must have been fully occupied. We're told that there were 158 passengers and a crew of 9 or 10 aboard that plane, so that's just for openers, the number of people killed. And again, we've had eyewitnesses telling us that people were falling from the upper floors, were jumping out the upper floors in apparent panic. So it is, by any stretch of the imagination, a terrible, terrible tragedy. We're also told that an organization that calls itself the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine is claiming responsibility.
Now, do you wonder if they have any connection to Osama bin Laden? I've heard that they don't.
I don't know.
I don't know
I've never
if
heard
that's
of
been
that
confirmed.
outfit before.
Right.
Have you heard?
I've never heard of that outfit before either, but I wonder if they have any...
Front for, yes.
Right.
No, the name is familiar. I have heard the name mentioned before.
But I believe they don't have any connection to Osama
bin Laden.
But you know what? This is all unconfirmed right now. I think what goes through your mind is, how did this slip past the FBI? How did this slip past the FBI with all these different attacks in 2 different states? Maybe our expert here.
The FBI. What does the CIA do?
The question you raised before we went off and saw some of the interviews was, would they be criticized for it? And the answer is, hindsight's always wonderful to say what we should have done, and probably they and other intelligence gatherers will be criticized. What you have to do, if you want to stop this, what you really have to do is infiltrate these organizations very early on. You can't put somebody in once it happens. You have to put them in, as the city police did years and years ago, and let them come up through the ranks. And that was stopped. Courts said you can't do that because we have to protect rights, and we don't do it. And what we have to now rethink and rebalance is what kind of restrictions we're going to suffer, which we have to in order to stop this. You can't take a person or stop a person from committing suicide. That gets proved in all over the Mideast every day of the week now, it seems. But we ought to be able to better restrict and better confront the people who are causing this, and we're not doing that.
Well, short of changing the Constitution, how do you go about it?
Well, you don't have to violate the Constitution necessarily to find out what people are doing. There's a right of privacy and there's an expectation of privacy, but that doesn't mean you can't have people infiltrate the groups. It means you're going to have to spend a considerable amount of time, effort, manpower, womanpower getting into these groups and gathering intelligence. And it means you're going to have to give up some of the things that the Constitution may or may not protect, but you need to do in order to protect people.
A friend of mine works for the FBI. He's, out in the field. He's an agent. And he tells me all the time that he's on surveillance outside people's houses who are known terrorists or possible terrorists. And they're constantly watching these people. So what I'm asking again is, how did this slip by? I mean, we can say, 20/20 hindsight, but this was obviously a synchronized planned attack on 2 states.
But are they watching the people in this country or the people in other countries?
Oh my goodness, look at the screen.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my God.
Oh. Both towers down.
Oh my God.
I hope they evacuated everybody out of that area because
covered in smoke.
In the world's history, the smoke and debris from this collapse undoubtedly causing yet more mayhem, more death, more destruction. The smoke and debris spread from the streets.
You're hearing unedited live sounds from the scene of that crash. The collapse of the tallest building in New York.
one of the great symbols of New York, if not this country, if not the world, forever erased from our memory.
No, I think it will always be in our memory, that's for sure, but definitely erased from our skies. This is just unbelievable.
A live picture from Chopper 5 showing the collapse of the World Trade Center.
What do we do now? Mr. Jaffe, what do we do now? You said I shouldn't be angry, maybe I shouldn't, but I am very, very angry by this, and we shouldn't let it shut us down.
No.
But this is a tremendous impact on our lives. Where do we go from here? What should we do? How do we respond?
I think we take a very deliberate course of action, which may take a week, a month, a year, where we start to put ourselves on track to understand that we are the target in a war and we have to fight it, which means we have to make sacrifices to protect ourselves while we go on. And we have to dedicate some resources that we haven't so that this type of thing doesn't.
This picture is surreal. It almost looks like we're frozen in time.
This is what we have dreaded forever. We went through 40 years after the war with our not having any real domestic violence. And now it's caught us. And now we have to put ourselves in a position.
Dick Oliver, right?
And I understand, Mr. Jaffe, that this tragedy has not ended yet, because the Capitol Police in Washington are now reporting that a plane has been hijacked, and they fear it is heading toward the Capitol building in Washington, which, as we have reported, has been evacuated, but yet another clear symbol of our country and our government and our way of life.
You also have to wonder all the police personnel and fire department who were called to Lower Manhattan to help the people in the Trade Center. let's hope they're okay now, too, with this collapse of the tower.
Yes, indeed. There were, I'm sure, plenty of rescue workers who were in and around that building. And with that collapse, I'm sure...
What about the command center?
More
command
devastation.
center.
The command center is, I think, in Tower 5 of the World Trade Center. And there's no way of telling whether that's intact. One would suspect that looking at that picture there, that live picture, that the command center is not in very good shape either.
And you have to wonder just how far this reached. I mean, you're talking about Wall Street is nearby, you know, a place that the world looks to.
Okay, the gentleman who said that the Marriott didn't
the
appear
hotel.
to be there.
History, yeah. Well, he had his vantage point was around by the financial center there, which is ironically built on the. They're talking to me in my ear. All right, this is we have tape. I understand a few minutes ago. This is the collapse as viewed from the ground. That picture just a few moments ago, you heard the people reacting in terror and horror as the World Trade Center simply collapsed. And apparently it is not over. Again, to repeat, we have a report from the Capitol Police that another plane has been hijacked, and they are afraid that that plane is heading for the Capitol building, which along with any other important building in Washington has been evacuated. And just to tell you, if you're outside the island of Manhattan, don't try to come in today. There's no way you can get in, and people are streaming out as quickly as possible.
Well, I believe bridges and tunnels have all been closed, and certainly any subway station that goes through the World Trade Center.
Does that mean, as well, I would guess that anybody who is in Manhattan now
will be walking if they can.
Yeah, Dick Oliver reported from near the Brooklyn Bridge before that that people were streaming across the bridge toward Brooklyn, but nobody coming back in.
I'm surprised that the Brooklyn Bridge has not been closed.
I think.
Well, maybe to pedestrians, you know.
I'm sure that they closed the Midtown Tunnel and they closed the other bridges across the East River, and of course the Hudson River crossings as well. And again, to repeat, there is no plane taking off in America today as a consequence of this unbelievable terrorist act. Mario Bosques has gone to Beth Israel Hospital downtown. Mario, are you there? All right, Mario, at Beth Israel Hospital downtown, where some of the victims of this terrible tragedy are being taken. You would imagine that, my goodness, the carnage must be unbelievable. Deaths may number in the thousands. I mean, the World Trade Center is the largest office building in this city, simply collapsed. You fear to even make an attempt at defining the enormity of this tragedy.
I mean, not only the people in the tower, the people on the ground now you have to be concerned about.
Sure, as you mentioned before, rescue workers there when the building collapsed some time after the initial crash.
And I know my husband, who was like a few blocks away from there, was told around 9:15 to evacuate. I hope he got the heck out of there and came home on his way home.
Rosanna, your colleague in the evening, John Rowland, is down in the newsroom right now talking about what's happening in Washington. John?
Yes, good afternoon, Jim. Trying to drink all of this in as you are. The enormity of this, of course, is beyond anybody in this business in this entire city. We've never in our lives seen anything even remotely approaching this. The latest information we have out of Washington from the State Department is that is being evacuated, the White House being evacuated. The Pentagon, of course, has already been attacked, as you've already been reporting. And there is word now that there is another hijacked plane possibly on its way to Washington. What the target there is, obviously we don't know, and we don't know what's being done to prevent any other sort of attack like that, other than every plane in the United States has been grounded. As you've been reporting, there are no planes allowed to take off. Virtually, we are at a standstill in this country right now, thanks to this terrorism attack. Both towers, the World Trade Center, both of them collapsed. God knows how many people were killed or injured then. And of course, then you had the people on the planes themselves. Those people, of course, died. So again, the State Department is saying that they are evacuating. Much of Washington is the public buildings there being evacuated. Here in the city, the entire lower Manhattan, as you can see right there, the incredible devastation of both of those buildings collapsed. Goodness knows around them. There are an awful lot of firefighters, awful lot of police officers down there working at the time when those buildings went down, the people inside, the people around them. One can only hope that as many people as possible were evacuated and had gotten out of there. We've been trying to find out exactly what's going on with the city personnel who were in the command center down at the World Trade Center. There's a command center down there, and we don't really know what's happened to that, as far as I've been told. If anybody in the building who is on my IFB who knows any more information about that or sees any more, please tell me, because that's a very important part of this entire effort, to try to coordinate life-saving and efforts to get people out of there. And we don't exactly know what's going on in that department, other than an awful lot of people are risking their lives right at this moment to try to save others. But as you can imagine, that's like a war zone down there. You'd have to be prepared with oxygen and everything else to be able to see through that, to get through that, to get people out of there.
One of our field producers is at NYU Medical, and there was some type of explosion. She can't confirm.
NYU Medical Center,
yes,
there's been an explosion?
Said, she and our reporter have debris on them. That's all I know, and the phone, she hung up. She's going to try to call the information.
So we have another report now of another, not an airplane, just some kind of a bomb went off at NYU Medical Center. So whatever is going on here is very, very coordinated. We would ask you and urge you, stay home, stay calm, don't panic, don't worry about anything. You're in the hands of the best life-saving, the police department, the firefighters in the city, best in the world. So a plane went down in Pennsylvania. We're told now that a plane went down in Pennsylvania, but we don't know anything much more than that a plane went down in Pennsylvania. We don't know where, and we don't know exactly what happened on that. But we will keep checking. As you can imagine, the news is flooding into us, and we're trying to get out to you best we can, bits and pieces. But again, I would just urge you, stay calm.
All right, John, let me interrupt you if I may, because yes, we have a further development. We're told now that from people in Washington that the Pentagon has undergone a partial collapse. As we've been telling you, the Pentagon was the third location struck by terrorists. And we understand that the Pentagon has collapsed at least partially. Mike Emanuel, are you there?
Yes, I am.
What can you tell us about this latest development?
It's just been a crazy day here in Washington. I mean, it's one of those days where you run in one direction, hearing news breaking in one area, and then it seems like something's happening in a different area. We can tell you that apparently a jet has crashed into the Pentagon. Personnel in that immediate area have been evacuated. There have been some reports that possibly another plane may be heading in that direction. Again, it's breaking news, so things have been details have been kind of sketchy, but we can tell you the United States Capitol has been evacuated. The West Wing of the White House has been evacuated. There are reports of a possible car bombing outside the State Department here in Washington, D.C. So it's been a wild news day here in the nation's capital, as it has been in your city. And so emergency crews are scrambling everywhere. And we can tell you veterans of Washington, D.C. have said for the first time they can ever remember they've seen military planes flying over Washington, D.C., patrolling the skies after the Pentagon was hit. Eyewitnesses saying that they believe it was a U.S. Airways plane that came in low over the city, hitting a portion of the Pentagon. We have not gotten any numbers in terms of injured or possible fatalities, but we will get to those as soon as possible. But simply a crazy day here in Washington, as it has been in New York.
Mike, do you know anything about a report that we have here in New York that, according to the Capitol Police, a hijacked plane is en route to Washington now?
We've heard that report as well, and then we've also heard people saying that that is not so, that that's an erroneous report. We're trying to get to the bottom of it, but as you can understand with a situation like this, there's all kinds of information flowing around. It's kind of hard to confirm what is absolutely accurate and what is not. We can tell you we've heard that, and we're checking it out.
We also heard that the Pentagon building itself at least partially collapsed. Do you know anything about that?
We've heard that as well, that perhaps the southern portion of the Pentagon, part of that has come down. Have not got numbers in terms of who may have been injured or killed, but we can tell you it's an unbelievable scene here in Washington, something that none of us ever thought we would see, as I'm sure people in your city never imagined to see either.
We can say the same thing here, John. Mike, that's for sure. Again, first the World Trade Center, one tower was hit by a plane, then another tower hit by a plane. Then we got word that the Pentagon was hit in Washington, and then the World Trade Centers collapsed in Lower Manhattan. John Rowland's down in the newsroom. John?
Well, Jim, I don't have much for you. I just have some sketchy information here that another explosion, a fourth explosion out the World Trade Center has gone off. One doesn't know if that's an ancillary thing because of what already happened or an additional explosion of some kind outside of that. There's also been a plane that has crashed in western Pennsylvania. A large plane crashes in western Pennsylvania. Officials at Somerset County Airport confirmed. That's right off the wire copy. Don't know if that's connected to what's going on. The Rodino Federal Building in Newark, that's been closed. All the workers there have been told to go home. Not necessarily because of a direct threat. They've just been told to go home to get out of there, obviously clearing out any federal, state, city, and local office buildings. Jim, that's the latest we have from here.
All right, John, I imagine, given the fact I'm hearing word from the studio. Okay, I'm told all federal office buildings in Washington have been evacuated. I would imagine, given the fact that we have Oklahoma City in our past, that federal buildings all over the country would be, just to be on the safe side, would be evacuated. Jim, you have to wonder
where the president is right now and where Mayor Giuliani is right now.
When we last saw the president, he had just taken off in Air Force One en route back to Washington. So he presumably is still in the air en route back to Washington. However, good question as far as Mayor Giuliani is concerned. One hopes that nothing untoward happened to the mayor.
Right, because wasn't he going to hold a press conference?
If he was down in that World Trade Center, perhaps we hope nothing personally happened to the mayor physically, but maybe that communications down there were wiped out by the crashes.
You know, they were saying that one of the planes they believe was hijacked from Boston, and in some of the things that I'm reading through here on the wire service, it says the second plane may have flown out of Newark, New Jersey, but that has not been confirmed. But Joe Kleins has just gotten up into the studio, the executive producer of the 10 o'clock news.
Yes. Okay, he'll be here in a second, but I just want to tell you the Board of Elections has just announced the primary has been canceled.
Has been canceled.
There,
yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Here's Joe right now.
Kleins, you look a bit the worse for wear. You've been running around this morning, obviously.
Yeah, they're not letting. I'm coming in from Long Island. They're not letting anything but real extreme emergency vehicles over the 59th Street Bridge. Thousands of people are walking across to and fro. I was on the bridge when I believe the second tower may have crumbled, and people were just standing in shock. I mean, everybody's jaw just dropped. Absolutely open. There's, New York, everybody has to go someplace, and people are going places, but everybody has a dazed look on their face. It's amazing because, if you walk, we're near 2nd Avenue here on the Upper East Side. You look down, it's many miles away, but people are still looking down the road, seeing this amazing, horrific display.
Now, you were able to see it from the bridge, were you?
I saw it right as somebody said, "Oh my God!" There was a second. Apparently the second tower. I was in the car listening on the radio when the first tower crumbled. It's just, it's amazing, and everybody's just, you can't put it into words. Shock, horror, this really, instantly people are looking at it and know that this is, we're never going to be the same after something like this.
It's curious how you even got here.
There's a parking garage at Queens Plaza that I often use. The traffic was very heavy. I ditched there and then I ran across the bridge. And a lot of people are running and, just coming back and forth. It really is an amazing sight.
All right, Joe, just 1 second, please. We're going to go back to Washington now, where Fox reporter Mike Emanuel has an update for us there. Mike?
Yes, Jim, I can tell you that it's a U.S. Air 737 that crashed into the Pentagon earlier this morning. Much of the Pentagon has now been evacuated. There are still some personnel in the basement of the Pentagon in a bunker-type facility, and basically it is designed to stand through an attack, but we can confirm that it was a U.S. Air 737 which crashed into the Pentagon here in Washington earlier this morning, and there are fire crews from all over the greater metropolitan Washington area fighting the fire in that area. I can tell you I'm a good distance from there. I can see smoke coming from that building. But I am not actually at the Pentagon to tell you exactly how bad the fire is, but it looks like it's pretty sizable at this point.
So these are not little Learjets we're talking about. We're talking about big, huge commercial jets.
You're absolutely correct. It sounds similar to the situation that you guys had in New York, a commercial jet possibly hijacked or possibly vandalized, so it ended up crashing and hitting the area around the Pentagon. We do not have numbers in terms of injuries or possible fatalities, but we are able to confirm that it was indeed a commercial 737 U.S. Air, we are told by officials on the scene, that crashed into the Pentagon this morning. But Pentagon officials the National Command Center at the Pentagon is still working. The rest of the building, though, has been evacuated, and we're understanding a lot of the damage is to the outer ring of the Pentagon. And some of our people on the scene say it doesn't seem to be severe, but there does seem to be a pretty good fire going, at least on the outside of the Pentagon.
Yeah, we're looking at your live picture right now, Mike, and that would seem to underscore that comment, because we see huge clouds of smoke billowing out of the Pentagon building.
Indeed.
Thank you, Mike, very much.
Sure.
Joe Kleins, back to you. When you saw the collapse of the building, were there people around you, and if so, what was the reaction on the part of the crowd?
They were, because there were a bunch of people who were on the bridge standing and watching, and when they saw it, they said, oh my God, the whole building just went over. Because at that point beforehand, you couldn't really tell what had happened to the first tower, because there's just so much smoke that you just see smoke and one tower, and then all you saw was smoke after that. Smoke over all of Lower Manhattan, enveloping all of the financial district, going over the East River. And, as I was driving in, I was hearing reports of people saying papers were flying over Brooklyn. This is an hour ago. So I can imagine what, this tremendous calamity. But people, the parking garage where I parked in Queens, it's at Queens Plaza. It provides, usually a lovely view of the World Trade Center. People, just dozens and dozens of people were running upstairs as I was running downstairs to try to get a view of this. I was running downstairs to the subway. Subway is a little bit of a chaotic mess. Most of the trains are not running into Manhattan right now, and so you got a lot of people on the platforms wondering what's going on. People are trying to make calls from payphones and they're not getting through.
Cell phones aren't working. Did you try yours?
I saw a lot of people on cell phones. I mean, I think it's very hit or miss. It's very hit or miss. Some people were talking intently. Everybody's talking about this. I mean,
New Yorkers were a tough bunch, but even this has brought the city almost to a standstill, if not a standstill.
Sure. I mean, we're on the Upper East Side, as I was saying before, but there are people, I mean, yes, they're walking with shopping bags and stuff, but there's, everybody's kind of,
just a daze.
A daze, absolutely. That's the best way to put it. Nobody knows quite what to make of this.
And look at the symbolism of this whole attack on primary day. A very, very important day in our country.
Sure.
And they attack some of the most important symbols in our country, the World Trade Center, the Pentagon.
At least in our city and locally anyway. But Barbara Nevins from UPN 9, our sister station, I don't think Barbara can hear me, but go ahead, Barbara. Tell us what you can see from your point.
I've been down here since a little after 9 o'clock, and every time I thought it could not get worse, it has. I was very close to the World Trade Center, right underneath the North Tower at Barclay in Washington. You could see debris falling from it like sparkles. People were in the windows waving white flags trying to get out, and then suddenly people started to jump. The jumpers began a little after 9:30 and continued way up until 10 o'clock. At about 10 o'clock there was a man about 5 stories from the top of the building waving a white flag from the corner on the west side of the building. A helicopter came close, and then suddenly police officers I was standing with said, "Run, run, the building is collapsing." Actually, I don't know if the helicopter bombed the building at that point or crashed into it, if that was a third attack. However, parts of the building, big chunks of the building began to collapse. Everybody ran back from the street. We were just 1 block north of the World Trade Tower at that point. We moved back. ran back. People were running, people were crying, people were saying that their friends were trapped in the building. We're back now at about Chambers and Greenwich Streets, and suddenly more people start jumping. There were at least 5, 6 bodies just jumping, and people were gasping in the crowd saying, please, please, please. They did want to see these people jump. They did want them to jump. Others were saying, what can they do? It's a choice between burning alive and jumping. It was really, truly one of the most horrible things that I have ever seen. We started to move back. We walked 10 blocks, and then suddenly, big North Tower seemed to rumble. We looked back. There was white smoke and sparkles, and the building was collapsing. People in the streets were running. We had been right there, right under the building. This is really, truly one of the most horrible things that I have ever seen. Back to you in the studio. We'll be here all day trying to report, to tell you what's been going on.
Barbara Evans-Taylor from UPN 9 News, our sister station, reporting the devastation that she saw from her vantage point. Joe?
Jim, getting back to what Rosanna was saying, the World Trade Center, everybody in this city knows somebody who works there.
That's right.
And many of those people who were involved in this calamity today were there in 1993 when the terrorists tried to take down the towers. You know, in some way, you think maybe that attack gave people a false sense of security, knowing that at that time those 2 towers stayed.
But also, would they ever strike it again? I mean, to go back again and hit the World Trade Center.
Well, let's ask our expert about that. Does that surprise you that they would choose the same target again, Joe?
No. I mean, they did it then. They did it to make a point. And now they've made their point. They've destroyed it completely. Now we've got to be careful, and now we have to be at a stage where we start to be much more careful of what we do and how we do it, and we have to start to look at these people who are involved in it. We'll give up some of our liberties, but we'll protect ourselves much better.
We've got to worry about all those people down in Lower Manhattan who, I mean, you know, from the pictures that we see, it's just covered in smoke. It's just billowing out and billowing out. It doesn't seem to end. I mean, how can you fight a fire? How can you rescue people in that area? I mean, I don't think they could have been prepared for that.
Well, I think the only way they could have prepared for it is by, as you mentioned earlier, Joe, by infiltration of these organizations and somehow getting word that this was going to happen. But apparently, every indication so far, we were just simply sandbagged by this, blindsided.
Absolutely. And what we have to do now is 2 things. One, aside from putting ourselves together and remaining calm and not a total panic, start to resurrect what we have, but then start to institute some type of control and some care. Hopefully the president's plane will be escorted, because who knows what other hijacked plane could fly at Air Force One. Hopefully they'll be careful. But this is a day. It's not a week or a month. After this day, we'll regroup. And we have to start to be much more careful and more prepared.
Put yourself in the position now. You're in the business. You're a pro. Put yourself in the business of the guys who have to make decisions now. When they're sitting down, what do they do? What's the first step the people responsible for reacting to this tragedy take?
Well, I think the first step you take is to protect the people and the sources and resources that you have, that you need. The president, the major offices, the office holders. And then you start to regroup, and then you start to gather. I mean, you have to do a number of things at the same time. You have to keep the country going. You have to protect the major people who are involved in the country. And then you have to start to figure out how this happened, how you're going to catch the people that did it, and how you're going to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Heightened vigilance is something you're really going to have to do, and you're going to have to do it very, very quickly.
That was one of the first things when we heard the president speak this morning. He says, we will go after these people, we will get these people. But how many times in the past have we heard these same words?
Well, we've heard them, and they have, in fact, identified people who've been responsible for major problems, whether it's the World Trade Center bombing in '93, whether it's the coal incident. We know who's involved. That will get them. I think that message tells the country, don't worry, we're going to have a heightened effect. But I think it's much more important, or equally important, to say to the country, we will go forward, we will keep ourselves intact, we will not be immobilized by this. The financial district's immobilized, as Joe said, because of what's happened there. It'll get cleaned up and it'll go forward again. That's the more important thing. You have to do all those things at once.
Would you say we are officially at war now?
No, that's not for me to say. I think we are officially now initiated in domestic violence in the United States apparently from outside sources or inside sources in a way we never believed was possible before, in a way that people said could happen and we said no, it wouldn't. And while we had skirmishes in World War II and we had submarine incidents in World War II and we had sabotage in World War II, from that time to the present, notwithstanding the World Trade Center incident in '93, we never really had devastation. Today we're exposed to having real devastation.
Primary day will never be the same again in this city, in this country.
I must say that one of the issues in the mayoral campaign was the security around City Hall, closing off City Hall to the public. And I must say I was one of the people who said that that's a terrible thing to do. I'm not sure anymore.
Yeah, it makes you, sit back and think. I have a question, though, for you, to Mr. Jaffe. You say we need to go in and infiltrate these organizations and get these people. And you sit back and you, even as a journalist myself, I have to say, you sit back, you watch coverage of a reporter getting in to interview the likes of Osama bin Laden, but the United States can't find him to get him.
Right.
That presents a real problem. You look at that and you say, well, what?
I can't tell you I have the inside track on any of that, and it may well be that people know where he could be, and it may well be that the government's not in a position to react to that. There are a lot of things that interact, and reporters frequently can get sources. Raise a different issue, if you would. If you have the sources and you have the internal control, why don't you turn them over? Are you willing to turn them over? And that's a whole different issue, which we may regrettably have to start to rethink at this juncture.
John Rowland is down in the newsroom. John?
All right, thanks, Jim. Just a couple of things. Number one, and perhaps the very most important thing I'm going to say to you today, is an awful lot of people need an awful lot of help, and that means blood. So if it's possible, if you're able to go to your nearest blood bank, do so. Go and donate blood. An awful lot of it is needed. Now, the nearest one in the neighborhood of Channel 5, where we are, is at 67th Street, right off of 2nd Avenue. We're going to try to get up a phone number for you for the different blood banks around. Perhaps there's an 800 number for all of them. Otherwise, we'll try to get as many ones as we can for you locally. So if you can, please donate blood. Number two, we said earlier there was an explosion at the NYU Medical Center. That turns out not to be true. There was not an explosion at the NYU Medical Center. Number three, the election is canceled for today for obvious reasons. There will be no primary today. That is canceled. No word on when it will be rescheduled. Yasser Arafat has condemned these attacks. We're told that he has come out just recently and condemned these attacks. Israel has evacuated all of her embassies around the world. All of Israel's embassies have been evacuated around the world. Back here in our country, a plane, possibly a 767, that's a large plane, has gone down in Pennsylvania, about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. We don't know if that is related to what is going on. In Connecticut, all the state and government buildings there are being evacuated just as a precaution. We don't have any information out of Connecticut other than this is just being done as a precaution. In Newark, the same thing is happening. The Rodino government building there has been evacuated. Again, the primary has been called off. Yasser Arafat has condemned these attacks. Israel has evacuated all of her embassies around